Hello everyone, and welcome to the press conference for Captive. And I will start by introducing the people who are behind the camera. At my left, my far left, producer Simone Erdl. At the center, of course, producer, director, co-writer Atta Magoyan. Now, it all starts with the young lady who vanishes, the kid who's abducted. Her disappearance definitely impacts her parents, Tina Lane and Matt Lane, Mireille Enos, and Ryan Reynolds. It also definitely impacts the tandem, soon a couple, of the cops that are affected to the case, as Nicole Dunlop and Jeffrey Cornwall, Rosario Dawson, and Scott Speedman. It also has an impact on the last person I have not quite introduced, and it's the rapport between abductor and abductee. Playing Mika the abductor, Mr. Kevin Durant. And I guess I'll throw the first series of questions to the actors. But everybody else is welcome to jump in. How did you do your research in terms of parents of kids that have been abducted, investigators, and God forbid, abductors? So, would you, parents first?
From what I'd read about this particular scenario, and there's actually a pretty good amount of literature out there that, characterizes this particular tragedy. Families are usually torn apart, and I thought that was quite interesting, that tragedy does not, in this particular instance, does not bring couples together, but rather pushes them apart. Irreparably so, and I thought it was fascinating to see how these people hang on to hope, and how that hope can also drive them apart, and how those coping mechanisms are, not adaptive in any way. They sort of disintegrate as we move forward, and and I like that they each had, although they're a couple, and although that they wish they could be together, they can't, as they grieve this and try to figure this out. And it was that interpersonal relationship and that intersection between their relationship and this tragedy that I thought was pretty fascinating.
Mireille?
I'm a parent myself, and so the imagination is a powerful thing. It was definitely very useful in this project, and exploring all of the many levels of grief and powerlessness and rage, and all of the different places that something like this would take you. I can't imagine being suspended in space for 8 years, and much less, so many people who live through this tragedy will never see their child again. But I was also really drawn to, even though these two people, these parents, can't manage to be in the same room together, they don't actually divorce, they keep a tie between them. And that kind of suspended hope was, I thought, was a really powerful theme in the film.
Now for the cops.
The cops. I read this book. What was the Julian Schur book called?
The One Child at a Time?
One Child at a Time. That was a very interesting read. Yeah, that was interesting. And I was lucky enough to talk to some actual detectives. Oh, sorry. That's no problem. In St. Catharines, Ontario, which was very cool to talk to them and just to see how their lives were deeply, deeply affected by this type of work, which was really informative.
Mm-hmm. So I read the same book. Did you send that to us, right? Yeah, it's really very thorough and very good read, and I think I highly recommend it, actually. I think it gives some really important sort of structure to parents and children alike, and really showing the responsibility, because the reality is, and one of the things he talks about in the book is that there are not literally enough cops in the world. If they were online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they could not protect every child. It's just not possible. And how important it is for people to understand the realities of this community that we exist on now on the internet, and how we have to be careful of that. So just in that same way of this is a child that was abducted outside in plain sight, so you still have those same dangers of strangers out there. But there are these predators that exist in this other space that you don't even consider. And that was just something that was really fascinating to kind of get more into. And we talked a lot about it going in because I'm on the board of V-Day. I work with Lower East Side Girls Club. There's a lot of advocacy work that I do that's specifically around a lot of abuse and around girls and women. So I had a bit of a history of knowing some of this stuff, but to get deeper into it was just really profound. And I have a huge respect for the people who do the job that we portrayed, who do this work.
Now, if one assumes that parents will readily talk to the people who are going to portray parents, what did cops or the official core that isn't affected to that kind of investigation, what did they not tell you or not show you?
I mean, so much. I mean, there was obviously a limit to what they could and could not show you. I mean, the thing that struck me the most was they were all parents of the two guys that I talked to were both parents to little girls, and just that, one of the things that struck in my head is that, there were no sleepovers, nothing like that. They couldn't allow any sort of night alone with the kids at all. So that really struck me the most. I mean, and obviously there's a limit to what they can do for you, show you anyway.
I think that one of the things that Scott's character is struggling with as well is one of the things they can't do is use children. So it's an effective block in terms of really penetrating a ring, because at a certain point, any of these rings want you to present a child. And the police cannot technically do that. And we see his character pushed to this very extreme place. And yet it seems without that, there's no way you could possibly enter into the core of what the ring is about. So the police are very hampered by that. And I can't imagine what that means in terms of getting access and being able to solve a lot of these issues.
Walking on eggshells here, Mr. Kevin Durand, what kind of research did you do?
My goodness. I would say that I was both terrified, horrified, and honored that Adam saw me as a perfect fit for this character. I was pretty scared. I read the J.C. Dugard story, which scared me even more. And then I read several documents that Adam had passed on to me that kept scaring me. But I thought, what a great challenge, and what a journey to take, because I was so scared. Yeah.
Question here, then behind.
Hi, Brian Johnson from Maclean's Magazine in Canada. If you'll permit me, I've got a couple of questions. The first for Ryan Reynolds. Welcome back to the snowy wastes of Canadian cinema. Can you tell me what brought you back? Is this something you've been wanting to do for a while? And what was the most peculiar thing or the most surprising thing about working with Mr. Atom Egoyan?
Oh, wow, that's a nice question. I wouldn't say that nationalism penetrates choices in this regard, but great directors do. I've always had if you look back at my track record, I've often gone back and forth between larger projects certainly to varying degrees of success, and then to smaller ones as well. And when Adam sent me this script, he and I met in 2004, I think, 2003, where Adam produced a different Canadian film that I'd done and called Foolproof. And when he sent me the script, I really, it's a director's medium. I mean, I've done this for 23 years now, and admittedly, it took me a long time to kind of realize that it is, in fact, a director's medium in every sense of the word. So you want to work with great directors. That's the bottom line. It doesn't matter if you're paid or not paid, or you just want to work with those kinds of guys. So to be in league with a guy like Adam was extremely exciting for me. And that notwithstanding, the story was incredible, I thought. My brother does this job. He does the job that Rosario and Scott's characters do. He works for Victim Services in Canada, and he's RCMP, and he also does the Serious Crimes Unit. He works for that task force as well. So just hearing him talk about this, and I had never really seen a story that was that examined it in this way, that really followed these people trying to cope with what was happening. So in short, it was about the project, and strictly about the project. I just really wanted to spend time with Adam and work with him and work on this project. So.
And if I can just ask the other question, which goes to Adam Egoyan. Adam, between the snow and the abduction and the surveillance, there are a number of themes that we've seen in your previous work right from the beginning. I'm wondering how conscious the self-referencing was, and what was the actual sort of original spark that made you want to make this film?
Well, the original spark is I'm from a town on the west coast of Canada, and there was a very well-known case there of a boy who went missing one day in a park very close to where I live. I know the park, I know where he went missing, and I know that the mother just turned her back for a moment. And every time I go back home, I see posters, and the parents are still very invested in this. Obviously, case believing that the child is there and that the child will return, will emerge from that forest one day. So that story really is at the basis of this, and I've been trying different approaches, and I think what really connected to me was when I thought about these three couples, that there's the couple of the captor and the captive, the fact that he stole her as a child and that now she's an adult and he has to negotiate this whole different relationship with her, and actually almost wants a marriage, which is impossible and perverse and not in any way warranted. Then you have a real marriage, which is warranted, and yet these people can't be together. They tear each other apart. There's a degree of torture, perhaps, involved in that, in terms of Murray always bringing up that moment and haunting Matthew, Ryan's character, with that. And then you see another couple develop through their work. And again, there's an intimacy, but there's also an inadvertent torture there where, he brings the niece in and she discovers that, and the trust is completely betrayed. And, these three characters, three relationships in these six characters just began to really sit with me, and that's how the story came. In terms of the other issues, yes, there are obsessions, like with any filmmaker, and I come from Canada, so there's a lot of snow, and that's a part of my landscape. And Niagara Falls, I just think, is this magnificent natural wonder, which is even more magnificent in the winter when it's frozen. And there seemed to be something very attractive about that, and that's my answer.
Go ahead, sir. Peter?
Good morning, Peter Hall from the Toronto Star. I wanted to also ask you about the musical cues, or I guess the references to Mozart and the opera cues. We know there's no accidents in an Adam Egoyan film. How did you choose those ones, and can you just elaborate on what your thinking was?
Well, I think many people might know that the original title of the film was Queen of the Night, and there was this, I was really haunted by that aria, and it's in the film, and this notion of the lost child, the queen trying to retrieve this child, and that all felt very powerful to me. And it was, music is a huge part of my films. I work really closely with my longtime composer, Michael Dana, and this was something that came up as this almost distortion of Mozart, that something is very pure, very clean, and yet it becomes distorted in some way, and that distortion mirrors very much the climate of the film and the mood of the film. The opera, I don't want to get it, I can give you all sorts of geeky intellectual reasons, which I'm not going to go into. But yes, it's thought through, and I'm sure there are people who will read the motifs, and I'm not going to do that today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Question here, then here, then here. Sir. Okay.
Hi, Fabian Weinthal for Unidas Magazine in Latin America. I have a question for Ryan. What do you think about the idea of having the Green Lantern captive in a festival like Cannes?
We're far from Niagara Falls here.
Yeah. I think Henri summed it up beautifully.
Thank you very much. Next question.
Karen Batt, Huffington Post. I really liked how the film distorts in the second half, just referring back. My question is two-part. One is, I notice again your interest in video and technology, and if you could comment on how you've evolved this idea in this film, and what interests you about the internet communication, video surveillance, all that here. And the second is not connected at all, which is I noticed that the two men are rather, not in real life, but the two men are kind of castrated or basically always screwing up or considered to be screwing up. At the end, they both vanquish and get their masculinity with the gun and with finding the daughter. And I just wanted to comment on masculinity in this film. So masculinity and
Video.
surveillance.
Wow. My two favorite
Technology
subjects.
first, castration afterwards.
Wow. Well, I do think the men, all make mistakes, like huge mistakes. I mean, from the most egregious mistake of abducting a child, which is unimaginable, and he's living with that. But then there's a mistake that Ryan makes, which is, I think, almost understandable. We've seen it as the viewer. We know what happened. We know that as parents, there are oftentimes we leave our child alone, and especially in a deserted place, and as we're going in to buy a pie, there's no reason to take that sleeping child out of the car, and yet he's punished for that. That is a mistake, technically, and his wife will haunt him, and he will be haunted by that error. And that, to me, was fascinating. And again, as I mentioned, Scott makes this mistake. And all the men in this film are living with that. And it would seem that they are all trying to rectify that mistake. I would say even Kevin's, going with Cassandra's plan is an attempt to keep her happy, to keep her creative. So in a dark way, he's also trying to rectify his mistake as well. I've talked endlessly about video. I'm not going to, again, go into any treatise on video and culture. And in this film, it's extending it into this place where there is an imaginary cult, which is not so hard to imagine. That for when people have crossed a certain line, the idea of then elaborating a surveillance sort of group that's watching the suffering of the people that have been left behind, and then on top of it having the actual victims illustrate that with a voiceover, and it just seems so extreme, and yet there is something so natural about it given the psychology that the film is examining. So I just went there. And no, I don't have any proof that such a ring exists, but it didn't seem so outlandish given the world we live in, where everything is observed all the time. So why not just push it a little bit further and create a private channel?
To answer the question about the fact that these men are emasculated to some degree, I never saw it that way. I see them as being powerless, which I think can be confused with emasculation. And I do believe if you're going to find a contrast between men and women in this scenario, I do believe that men fear shame more than women, which can be their downfall to some degree. And that shame is intrinsic with emasculation, I suppose. But I don't think that that at least I'll speak for my character. I never felt that he was emasculated. I felt that he was in a shame spiral to some degree. This happened on his watch. He's carrying this little bag of rocks around with him all day, every second of the day, and he's experiencing the consequences of that. I think in the end, his redemption is finding his power and finding his voice and believing in himself and seeing that those convictions actually led to something positive. In essence, he's regaining his power. But I don't think it's his masculinity necessarily.
Scott.
Oh yeah, no, I never even thought about it like that with masculinity at all. No.
I could have just said that.
Yeah,
Castration? No.
Sir?
Hello, Jack Mulvin from The Times. A question for Ryan. As a leading man, if you had been, well, and having a career as a leading man, I mean, if you'd been offered the part that Kevin received, is that something that you think you could have taken, or might that have damaged your career?
I think Kevin has the most difficult role in this entire film, and you know, I don't know if I would have been up to the challenges that Kevin was up to do that role. I like to think that I am and would be, and you know, that is a very difficult thing. I've read a lot of scripts where I've been offered the villain role, and for me, Hollywood tends to, you know, stereotype villains. I think that people have different convictions. I like villains that have a real belief system that they stand by, and they don't wake up in the morning and say, I need to hurt somebody. They wake up in the morning, they're wired differently. I need this, or I want this, or I have to have this in order to blank. So I thought Kevin did such a beautiful job in the film of actually underlying this character, and if I may be so bold to say, with some empathy to some degree. I think that anytime you're creating a complex character, you're layering that character with his own belief system, and what Kevin did was important, and I don't know if I would have been up to that challenge. I like to think I would be, but we'll never know.
But behind Kevin, as it were, there's also Bruce Greenwood, and behind Bruce Greenwood, there's almost everybody that attended the charity ball. Well, that's scary.
That's left purposely ambiguous, and it's very scary. It's an incredibly scary idea that maybe this whole thing is constructed to entrap Rosario, but I'm not answering. I think it's left ambiguous in the piece.
I think that's important, though, to show that the villains are not how they're normally portrayed. You know, it's very, I think a lot of times, especially pedophiles, are shown to be outcasts of society, someone you can very clearly eyeball walking down the street and going, that person shouldn't be here. You know, and it's not someone how it usually actually is, where it's a family member, it's a school teacher, it's someone that you're familiar with, it's someone that you know, it's your neighbor, it's someone you work with, it's, you know, so you're watching these conversations between people, and they have regular jobs and friends and lives and really nice homes that you'd like to have dinner at. You know, it's not always portrayed. If evil doesn't look like someone standing in the corner with a mustache going, you know, like it would be so easy.
Although he did have a mustache.
Yeah, he did. He did, but not going.
I worked hard on that mustache.
He was doing arias. You know, sometimes evil is with a mustache, but he's not going. He's doing opera. You know, and I think that's actually what's kind of striking as well about this, is that it doesn't make you ever feel comfortable with going, oh, that's that person on the fringe, and I'm not related to that. I don't know that person. This is a horror that's far away from me. No, actually, you could be the person sitting right next to you right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point, that much of the mood of the film is to put the viewer into a place where you're not sure how far this goes, like how deep this goes, and how implicated you are watching it as well in some way. So it's a territory that I find really powerful, that the position of the viewer and the imagination of the viewer is also running wild as you're thinking of how deep this might actually go.
Considering what has been said up to now, I just don't know, Simone, how you survived handling that group over months.
Well, I had help from my producing partners, Jennifer Weiss and Stephen Traynor, but it's working with Atom and his sort of command of the set and the story and what he wants, and everybody just has such faith and trust in him that it allows the rest of us the freedom to do our best work as well. So without Adam, I'm not sure that I could have handled it.
Is it terrible to say that we laughed a lot while we were making this movie and having a really great time? It's horrible. Like, it was like, we'd be laughing hysterically, and then he'd go, action, she'd be crying, and I'm holding on to her. Like, it was horrible. Yeah. I think it was the only way to kind of get through it, though, because it's just,
it is the mark of a terrific director, though, that you have that expanse on the set each day, and you know, I've worked with a lot of directors that, you know, I worked with a director years ago that said, don't blink.
Come on.
And I said, what do you mean don't blink? Can I treat myself to a blink every hour just to lubricate the eyeballs, or I don't understand? And he said, it betrays vulnerability. And I just thought, wow, that right there is grade A shit direction. What I love about working on a set like this, though, is that you have that ability to just be everything and be vulnerable, and in a moment that calls for anger, you can actually go the other way, and Adam will sit with it, and he'll tell you, certainly, if he doesn't feel it's the right way to go. But for me, it was a real relief. It was just something that I really needed at that time.
You just blinked 24 times.
I certainly did. I'm a proud blinker. Yes.
Question over there.
Bonjour, je suis Brigitte from the journal France Armenia. Knowing that you're from Armenian origin, I would like to ask you if there's a reference to repair the search of the parents, the Armenian parents who lost their child during the deportation, during the massacres in Turkey. Is this story a repair of these parents' story?
Well, I think the issue of repair is very important to me, and there's obviously cultural reasons for that, and there's a hope for that, but I'm also very interested in trauma and people living with trauma, and that's probably a lot to do with background and stories I've heard.
Question over there. Go ahead.
Hi, yes, I'm Rochelle Lucozzi from New You. I'd like to ask a question for Alexia on the role of the woman, because we ignore the woman here. And what is the care of the woman? What was your strength of portraying how you had to keep strong through this ordeal?
Cass isn't here.
Sorry, she's
we could
not
call her
here.
Tina.
Tina. Well, I mean, anybody can speak on maybe the director.
I mean Mireille.
Yeah.
I mean not Rosario. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, I'm sorry, what was the question?
The role of the woman.
Yes.
You were a younger woman, of course, but, just the role of a woman as far as staying strong through an ordeal like this.
I mean, what I thought was so interesting about the way that Adam created her is that she's not always strong. She's horrible to her husband. She's every possible thing you can imagine, which I think is so true to life, that in a situation like this, you would be ripped in so many different directions. One moment you could be in deep grief, the next moment rage, the next moment catatonia. And it was exciting to be given permission to explore all of those possibilities, and to not always be likable, to not always be someone that you necessarily want to have compassion for, except that you do because the situation is so grave. I actually didn't feel like I was strong. I felt like I was a million other things, but that was appropriate.
Question here. We'll take the last three questions. Question here, question here, question there. Go ahead.
Hello, I am Ernesto Garrat from El Mercurio, Chile. Sorry. I'd like to question to Mr. Ryan Reynolds. What were the challenges you faced in order to build this character? I mean, because you're a great comedian, you have been in big blockbusters, and what challenge did you face or not to face in order to build these more dramatic portraits of characters? Thank you.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, it just came along at sort of a perfect time for me. I worked in large films, and again, it's a director's medium through and through. And when you work on a large film that is not going the way you hope it would, or anyone hopes it would, it's a pretty difficult scenario to be around, and it can be rough on not just the actors, but everybody involved, right down from catering to the producers. So. I just love the idea of immersing myself in another world and having this opportunity to work strictly on character. There was nothing about this film that relied on dragging an audience down toward the bottom line by their wallet. It was about telling the story and being a part of the story, and as a viewer, really getting to immerse yourself in this world. And I just felt privileged to get that chance to be there. I think the most difficult thing really was unrelated. It was that I dragged my wife from our honeymoon in Africa and landed her in Sudbury, Ontario, in Canada, when it was minus 40 degrees, into a little roadside motel where we stayed for a month. That was the biggest challenge. So ironically, she coped with it much better than I did. So, yeah.
Question here, then here.
Bonjour, Frédéric Rougeau, lemaxcinema.fr.
Frédéric Pujol. I have a question for Atom Egoyan and Ryan Reynolds. The character played by Scott Speedman is surprising because he uses his instinct and his emotions a lot. He's perhaps a bit young in his profession. He can't keep hold of his emotions. Was that a core theme for you? Is that how you viewed things from the outset? Is this dear to your heart, or is this something that just evolved when you wrote the screenplay? And I'd like to put the question to Ryan Reynolds as well. It's the same question, in fact. As his brother does this very job, does Ryan Reynolds think that one can do this job while having such strong emotions? Can one function on the basis of emotion and instinct?
I think that, the role of Scott is, to bring someone into this world, to bring someone who has the specific skill set that he has, the energy that he has. We needed to actually, because it's such an unusual world, that first interview and that first introduction is so important. And to read it on Scott, having worked with Scott, having known what Scott's extraordinary capabilities are as an actor, I knew that we could enter that world through his face, through his demeanor, through his energy, and through a frustration that he had. He also has this very, very tricky role because he has this suspicion of Ryan, and it's a suspicion which is ultimately unfounded, but is very real to him, and has to feel tangible. And I knew Scott would be able to bring that. I think there's a great comfort in working with an actor whose instrument you know well and you can imagine in a part as you're writing it.
Any comment, Ryan?
Sorry, I actually didn't get the question.
Oh, because you didn't have the translation.
Oh, I didn't have this on. I apologize. And I grew up in Vancouver on the West Coast, passive French.
Ryan agrees. Ryan agrees with everything I said.
I agree with everything Adam
because
says.
As I was
since 1996.
Yeah, he's totally in accord.
Yeah.
Bonjour, c'est une question. It's a question for. I'm Nicole Gabriel from Jeune Cinéma. It's a question for you. Ici. Atom Egoyan. I'm familiar with your films, which I like very much, and it's a rather personal question. Are you a reader of Henry James?
Not particularly. I mean, I'm a passionate reader, and I've read James, but I don't connect, him necessarily to this project. But that's an interesting observation. But
it's about ambiguity, and I thought from the middle of the film always of what Maisie knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I just. Look, I'm the product of a lot of different sources and influences, and I'm always very appreciative of people who draw lines and connections which aren't necessarily the ones I would make immediately, but we are the product of everything we've read and watched, and that certainly Henry James might be factored into it as well. Thank you.
I'm afraid our time is up. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Well, I hope to see you again.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Get a proper hug.
Yes! 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 Yes!
It's great to see you.